What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome in to another edition of In the Paint. We break down everything men's college basketball has to offer, and we are recording on March 1st, 2023. That means we are at the home stretch. We're getting ready for the madness to begin. And with me, as always, to help break it down, we have my co-host. We'll start with Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing today, sir?
Oh, it's a great time of year, isn't it? I can hear the music in the background, and I got my dancing shoes all ready, polished up, good to go.
Perfect. Yeah, it's that beautiful time of year. I know Julius Caesar wasn't a big fan of March, but you know what? I think college basketball fans are, as we kind of just dot the I's and cross the T's and get ready to, as Raider Jim said, go dancing in a few weeks. We also, of course, have Coach Brandon Lupian. You can find Coach at Portland 76er. How you doing tonight, sir?
Doing well. Just hanging out on a blustery day, getting ready to do a podcast with you fine gentlemen. And as long as Raider Jim's dancing, I don't have to, but I can watch all the dancing on the big screen in these next couple of weeks, you know?
Yeah, I would not want to follow Raider Jim on the dance floor. I'll tell you that right now. That's a tough act to follow.
I hate following him on the podcast.
Yeah, right? It's hard enough, right?
Yeah, it's hard enough
there.
He's really pushing us to be excellent, which is great.
Raises the bar every time. But
Raises
yeah, it is
the
a
bar.
very, very wintry. I think I heard on the radio today we have a wind advisory, a flood advisory, a winter storm advisory, a blizzard advisory for the mountains, all kinds of advisories. So if you're in Southern California, consider yourself advised. I was sitting at a stoplight before I got home to roll the pod, and I'm just looking at the clouds, and it looked like a animated painting. The clouds just moving faster than you can keep up with. That's how windy it is here in Southern California, as lots of storms coming through, and unfortunately our infrastructure not quite set, as I apologize to my suspension every time I get on the road. But it is, of course, time to talk some college basketball. We'll get to the normal segments throughout the podcast, but we'll start, as always, at the top for the teams of the week. It's a little ironic. We're starting with the North Carolina Tar Heels. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Tar Heels possibly becoming the first preseason number one to miss the tournament. And we said, okay, that big game against Virginia, they have to get that win to even keep hope alive. And they did. They went out, they got the win over Virginia, still firmly on the bubble. Maybe even one of the first four teams out, but they are moving in the right direction. As I said last week, nobody wants to play this team in March. That 12 or 11, that's a dangerous spot for this team to be in. We also have number 21, Maryland. Unfortunately, Northwestern got the curse of the In the Paint team of the week. We called them out last week, and they struggled. Maryland did beat Northwestern. They also beat Minnesota. They are 20-9 overall, and very sneakily are second in the very good Big Ten. You got a blue blood here in UCLA, currently ranked number 4 in the country. They finish off a perfect February, going 8-0 after that late January loss to USC. They are 25-4 and have really all eyes on that number 1 seed. Kind of conversely, on the Pac-12, we have ASU. They defeated Arizona in Tucson with a crazy buzzer beater. They're 20-9 overall. Another team that is on the bubble, but I think they're in better shape than North Carolina, especially after this win, going to Tucson and getting a win over their rival there. They also did beat Utah as well. And finally, a little maybe bias here from your host, Villanova. Another team that I think even the most, the fervent Villanova fans would say they're on the bubble. That's probably being nice. This is a team that probably has to win their conference tournament to get in, but they did have a very good week, probably their best week of the season, with wins at number 16 Xavier and home to number 19 Creighton. So 2 wins over ranked teams. Still don't think it's enough to get them in as an at-large team, but they're building some momentum. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Teams of the week.
Teams of the week. I'll tell you what, how about a little story from Raider Jim? It's about 207 years ago, I believe it was 1816. There was a change in power, and a warrior named Shaka Kazemzong Gakona took over the Zulu tribe for the Zulu nation. He took over from his father. He was named Shaka Zulu. And then several years later, several decades later, a young man was born in Wisconsin, and his dad named him Shaka. At the time, they thought, what kind of name is Shaka? Shaka Smart is doing everything right. Here's the similarities, believe it or not. I can really tie all this together. One thing about Shaka Zulu, the Zulu warrior, he had a great army. He was in charge until he was assassinated, but his battles were not bloody battles. They weren't bloodbaths. What he was good at is he taught his tribe, he taught his warriors how to adjust their fighting. He adjusted their weapons. He changed the length of blades. He did all these types of things. And if you look at the way Shaka Smart coaches, what does he do? He takes the people he has. He knows who's got the strengths, who's got the weaknesses, and most important, he ties everybody up with a nice ribbon and puts a great package out on the floor. Watch out for Marquette. They're dangerous. They're leading the Big East right now. They're going to go in as the #1 seed in their tournament. I got my eye on these guys.
Yeah, come for the college basketball talk. Stay for the Raider Jim history lesson. Wasn't quite sure where that was going, but
And you
that was
expect to
perfect.
follow up with him,
I was over here
talk
looking
about-
over my notes going, hold on a second, am I
I was
on the right podcast right now? But no, that's perfect. It's a great analogy there, and it all ties itself together. Absolutely love it. Coach, what are your thoughts? Any history lessons for us?
No history lessons. I just want to reiterate some of the teams that are actually listed on the itinerary, starting with North Carolina. Before they got that win over UVA, they had Notre Dame, and that was the start of their run. And there's no hotter team in the ACC right now than UNC. Backs against the wall. The newer guys are finally starting to gel with the older guys. Speaking of Pete Nance, where I mentioned a week ago, his stretch from beyond the three-point line was atrocious, and that's kind of what has defined their record by now. They're just a bad three-point shooting team, but he's starting to put things together the last couple of games. Big game against UVA, speaking of, but as it looks right now, this weekend's going to be a huge determining factor where North Carolina stands in the ACC tournament. We absolutely have forgotten what an excellent job John Shire's done at Duke. They are going to be the unanimous 2 seed in the ACC tournament, let alone it's the rivalry game between the two. I forgot what interstate it is, but I'm sure Raider Jim has it. He knows. But, North Carolina, let's not forget, we talked about them all the way from week 1. They were in this rundown from week 1, and we put their backs against the wall, and lately they've responded, and a lot of good things are happening. But they're 1 win away from having a 20-win season. A lot of programs would love to have 20 wins. So good run for them. But yeah, I think I'll be remiss to ignore speaking about Villanova, winners of 7 of 8. Huge win last night against Seton Hall, who was actually the 6th team in the Big East. So now they've flip-flopped as far as the Big East tournament goes. If everything stands as is, Villanova, first round will play the bottom seed of the Big East in the first round, which would be Georgetown. before facing one of the top 5 seeds. However, as much as we've counted them out up until now, and they just weren't the Villanova of seasons past, the return of Justin Moore has paid huge dividends. An experienced guard that I think he finished 6 of 6 from the line last night to end the game. And then, they're starting to finally gel. I believe this is his 4th game back. I mentioned it. Nobody in the Big East wants to face Villanova right now, especially after that win against Xavier a couple weeks ago. But their last game is against UConn, and I'm not sure where it's at, but it's UConn. And if they could beat UConn and flip it, dropping UConn to 6, Nova to 5, that gives them a first-round bye in the Big East and some breathing room. And again, they're the hottest team in the Big East, the winners of 7 of 8. And regardless of the teams that they beat or whom those teams have been missing, nobody wants to play this Villanova team down the stretch. At large berth, probably not immediately, but a good run, a win, a regular season win against UConn, a good run into the Big East tournament. I think they're due for a last 4 in, so who knows? But if they make a run in that Big East, that's going to take one of those teams out of the Pac-12 or possibly out of the Mountain West and really possibly out of the ACC and possibly just send one of those teams out to the NIT. Who knows? But, Nova, great run. Can't wait for Saturday. They play UConn. It'll be on.
Yeah, that game will be in Villanova, at Villanova. Unsure if
Even
they go to the
better
Big.
for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Even
And that's a
better
great
for
call.
us.
That bye would be huge for Villanova. It essentially, gets them one step closer to the tournament because that's, what they need to do. They'll need to win that conference tournament more than likely.
And it's a quad 1 win.
Yeah,
with number 19 UConn. So that just adds to the resume moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week. A lot of eyes are probably this weekend going to be on some of the smaller conference tournaments as the bigger conferences kind of, like I said, cross the T's, dot the I's, get everyone ready for conference tournaments, which will be starting essentially, a week from today in most conferences and culminating in next Sunday's Selection Sunday. Can't wait for that. But for me, obviously, the UNC kind of, I don't think they were listening or anything, but they had to know that they were in a situation where it was time that they needed to get going right now. Big win for them. Same with Villanova, but I will say Maryland has been one team that's kind of gone under the radar for me in a very, very Big Ten, very, very good Big Ten with all the shuffling. It seems like even with Michigan and Michigan State kind of being down this year, still a really good conference. Minnesota's right there in the thick of it. Maryland is right in the middle of in the thick of it. So we'll see how that goes as we get ready to get the conference tournaments all figured out. So yes, Raider
I
Jim.
could get your opinion from the both of you. What are your thoughts on the formerly thought invincible Purdue Boilermakers who have now lost 3 out of the last 4?
I think I believe one of you two said it may have been Coach, but a few weeks ago we talked about the inside-outside game that Purdue is essentially, that's what they run. Obviously, you have a 7'4" big man. He's going to get doubled, maybe even triple teamed, and you're going to need him to pass out of that. And I think they are so unbelievably one-dimensional. They have Zach Edey and a bunch of other guys, and someone is going to need to be able to shoot outside of the paint. I mean, I'm not even talking threes here. I'm just talking mid-range jumpers. And
right.
I just think they're way too one-dimensional. They're looking at this 7'4" monster who's very dominant, but you get 2 or 3 guys on him. And, I think Purdue was maybe too reliant on Zach Edey, and it's starting to kind of come back and bite him right now.
They came out the shoot just racing, And I think we all kind of are guilty of looking at like the rabbit in the tortoise race. Like they came out the gun, just guns blazing, undefeated, big men in the center, player of the year talk, big conference. And yeah, they were the team to beat early on, not realizing every head coach in that conference, every head coach in America has that position for some type of reason or another. Game planning, figuring out, strategizing ways to beat each and every team on their schedule. And let's not, and that includes Purdue, and that includes game planning against Eddie and his team, making that team one dimensional. It's a good use, good terminology for it. Making that team one dimensional has shown weaknesses, and every team in the Big 12 is talented and skilled. Our Big 10 is talented and skilled and athletic, and they're all great head coaches, or they wouldn't be in that conference. Just giving it time, and I guess you could get through the regular season and see where you're at in the tournament, because that's what they're all playing for, and including Purdue's coach. He could just be game planning for when it's really at stake, and yeah, that was a hot team early on, not so much now, but great call there, Raider Jim.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's the fall from grace that we've seen maybe out of like the Texas Techs, or some of the others, but for a team that was for the most part top 5 all season, they've definitely kind of stubbed their toes a bit more than they'd like, I'm sure, right now. And I think that the real, I guess, kind of concerning part is that blueprint now for how to beat this team is out there. Can you emulate it? That's another question.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there is that blueprint that it's pretty obvious this is how you beat that team. Now, can you do it? That's another question, but it can be done. So going forward, it's going to be very interesting. But at the end of the day, I think that's what makes March Madness so great is essentially, especially this year, every single one of these teams is beatable. At least after the first game, with all due respects to the 16 seeds out there, I don't see any 16s getting the job done. But moving on to the second segment we got, and this was kind of touched on last week thanks to Raider Jim, and it's kind of ballooned or up into bigger situations. We have the situation in Alabama with their star Brandon Miller, who it seems is at the very least wrong place, wrong time. I hate that word, but I mean, he was a part of something that maybe he felt like he shouldn't have been a part of, even though maybe the evidence says that he should have known. But he was present when someone was shot. And the University of Alabama has decided not to suspend Brandon Miller. Nate Oates, the coach, has pretty much gone out and kind of, I guess, originally made it seem like, you're all making too big of a deal about this. He was just wrong place at the wrong time. And then we get news that he was part of a group text that essentially this individual said, hey, bring a gun to this place. And at the end of the day, he was there at that place and someone was shot. I don't know how you can consider that wrong place, wrong time. Like I said, if I get a group text and one of my buddies asks, hey, bring a gun to this place, first of all, no. Second of all, get out of that situation. And third of all, I know for a fact I'm not going anywhere near that situation. I love all my friends, but I'm not putting myself in a situation like that. Nate Oates came out and apologized for those comments. Okay, fine. I'm sure there was somebody at the top who, nudged him to do that. But Alabama and Brandon Miller just make the situation so much worse when he comes out for his little, introduction at lineups. And he's got another guy doing the pat down like you would if you're going into like a cop would pat you down. Like, I'm not asking you to be the most self-aware individual in the world, but have a little bit of self-awareness. To me, I think this is essentially spitting in the face of everyone that's kind of saying, hey, this should be taken a little more seriously, and not to mention the victim's family. I mean, if I'm a family of that victim and I'm watching this person A, play, and then B, make a mockery of the situation in pregame warmups and pregame lineup, whatever introductions, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm 3,000 miles away from the situation. I can only imagine how that, how the students feel, whether their team's good or not, and how the victims' families feel. But Raider Jim, you were the one who kind of got us started on this last week, so I'll let you chime in on this.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was real proud of our little group here because we did bring it up. We did talk about it. We spent a few minutes on it. And by that evening and by the next day, it seemed like that's all I was hearing about every 90 seconds on sports radio. So good job, guys. As far as there's a great line. It's a quick line. It's the end of a scene with Harvey Keitel in Pulp Fiction. And he's driving away from the wrecking yard. And he looks at the young lady he's with and he says, just because you are a character doesn't mean you have character. And I think that's very important. And right now, first of all, Nate Oates has to quit being an ostrich. Get your head out of the sand. You're the head coach. You can't say I'm sitting there with a whiteboard drawing up plays. I don't know what's going on. Gee, maybe they've been doing this all year. How do I know? Can't keep track of everybody. Look, pal, you're the head coach. Earn your money. And if you ask me, as far as earning money goes, Greg Byrne, the Bama AD, should be speaking publicly. He should almost be admonishing some of these guys publicly. And I think it's maybe even time that the SEC steps in and says, hey, you're making this whole group look really bad. And because it's the old guilty by association thing, the behavior that we saw with this pat down thing, that's the type of seeds that get planted and foster the growth of an Antonio Brown. And it needs to be stopped now. Don't let this guy go. This kid's going to think he can do anything. I'm impenetrable. I can't be beat and I can't be taken down. So somebody needs to put the young man in check. And if they don't do it at the administration level, guess what? It's going to happen to him on the street level.
Yeah.
I assure you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's powerful words. And I don't know how to even follow up on that. But it's, it's a lack of institutional control
Bingo.
on that basketball coach's head. From what I was told or from what I heard on the radio or what I heard or read in articles, that little thing has been something they've done all season long. Whether they've done it or not, the timing isn't appropriate for it. So if Nate Oates is playing, like you said, head in the sand, or, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, there's a lack of institutional control in that basketball program. Something's got to be done. Brandon Miller should have sat out 2 games. It's looking like Nate Oates is risking some time himself with that and his lack thereof action toward his star player. So it's unfortunate, and I hope it doesn't take to the streets as it easily can. There is a victim and that victim's families that they're suffering, and it's a sad situation. But we're all right in saying you got to know better, right or wrong. It was a wrong time, wrong place, wrong to get in the car, drop off this guy's gun, teammate's gun. It was just, it shouldn't have happened. And if you don't know any better, you'll learn it quickly. You'll learn.
Yeah. And I think Raider Jim also hit it on the head. I mean, he hit everything on the head, but also in terms of, it does embolden this kid now to kind of be like, oh, hey, I can do whatever essentially I want. And I also do think we at this point, and I think we're seeing a younger generation that maybe had parents that allowed stuff like this, and now not to this level, that it may be a bit dramatic, but maybe the lack of discipline and things like that, because
don't get me started on the entitlement.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think we're in a situation, and I keep bringing it up, and this is a hypothetical that we'll never know the answer to. And of course, Alabama will say, no, this is the same situation. But if Alabama was 15-15 right now, I don't know that Brandon Miller would be playing. I hate to say it, but it's a situation of, this is okay. Wow, look at us. We're at the time #1 in the country. And, we're essentially that quote unquote football school. Let's try and ride this and hope that no one kind of sees the Wizard of Oz thing, right? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Like, you listen to what I'm saying, not what, your eyes are telling you. And, it's very unfortunate. And for me, once again, I think it goes back to the victim's family. I don't think they're watching Alabama basketball, but, going down the road, they're watching an NBA game and Brandon Miller is on TV. And hopefully you still can hear me because it is hailing like crazy outside my house right now. But it'll be a reminder every single time. And once again, this is, obviously well above our pay grade in terms of the legal side of things, but just the very small things, knowing he was in a group text, that it was asked for a gun at this place and he ends up at that place. 2 and 2 equals 4.
The kid was a shining star and still is. He's a hell of a basketball player. But if you were somebody who was looking from the corporate NIL side, you're going to go near that kid now? Unless you're Smith and Wesson, no.
Oh boy, that was a bomb there from Raider Jim. Wow, I love that. From Raider NRA Jim. May be calling too, but no, you're right. You're hit the nail on the head as usual, and it's a really, really tough situation. And a situation that at the very least, I hope we learn from. And I also want to say, I'm not calling for this kid to be exiled from everything, but I think he needs to sit down and we need to let some litigation figure out maybe, something else rather than, no, he's not being suspended at all. And this is what we're going to see the first day we get him back. At the very least, someone should have said, no, you don't get to do that. For your pregame introduction. I don't care what you've been doing all season, period. So really unfortunate situation always around, but we'll see how that goes going forward.
When they played Gonzaga, he was single-handedly, he kept his team in the game. Single-handedly, he probably would have been the guy that took down Gonzaga that day, but Gonzaga was firing on all cylinders. But I just remember watching that game thinking, who is this kid? And put 4 guys on him if you have to. Didn't matter where he shot from. Ball was going in. So he is a great player, and I do hate to see him in this position.
Well, I do believe, I think Mr. First mentioned it already. This guy's a top 3 pick after Victor, and I'm not going to butcher the last name. He's probably number 2. So, he's got a lot to look forward to. He's got a lot of growing up to do, and I don't want to mention the entitlement aspect of it because that's a whole nother 30 minutes. But I just hope it doesn't get to a point where there's, especially for those kids that are watching, thinking they could get away with everything, a glorification.
Brandon, first, your hail just made it to my house.
There we go. I passed it over.
Oh,
thank
you. Glorification of the villain, much like in wrestling. And I'm not dogging wrestling, but the glorification of the villain in wrestling, it influences kids. The glorification of the villain in situations like this, or possibly in any other pro sport we talk about and have athletes, superstar athletes, be that villain, that's a bad message.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And don't get me wrong, I am a fan of the quote unquote villains in sports. I think we need them, but there's a line. When people are dying, that's beyond villain. That's essentially at the point, like I said, at the very least accessory. And that's not okay. So
no.
But moving on to our player spotlight. Had to dive a little deep today, but you know what? I was looking over the teams of the week and I said, you know what? UCLA has been a little under my radar. What's going on with the Bruins? What's the reason they are 8-0? And there's a lot of reasons, don't get me wrong. And it's not just this individual, but a big reason why UCLA is playing the way they are is Jaime Jaquez Jr. Hopefully I didn't absolutely butcher that, but he's 6'7", senior guard out of UCLA, averaging 17 and 9 for the Bruins. You don't see a senior running around at these blue chip schools too often, so I always like to give them a little extra shine. Really, really good guard, and I think when we see in March are the teams with good guard play usually have the advantage. It's not always the case, but if you have good guard play, we're moving in the right direction already. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the senior guard from UCLA?
Yeah, first I got to start with this. Okay, I have a lot of Hispanic blood in me. I've got Filipino blood in me. I have had the honor of being in the presence of Tony Gonzalez, the tight end from the Chiefs, and Anthony Munoz, this massive tackle that used to play for the Bengals. And now I see this kid, 6'7", Jaime Jaquez, and I look up to the sky and I say, where's the fairness in the distribution of genes? I mean, I'm the tall one in my family. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, his mom and dad were basketball players at Concordia. That's how they met. And so it's not, it's genetic for this guy. You know, basketball's in his blood. His sister is going to play, is committed to be on the freshman or for the Bruins as a freshman next year when she gets out of high school. And his younger brother is apparently an offensive or a defensive lineman for Camarillo High School, where Jaime also played ball. Born in Irvine, but he played for the Mexican national team in 2019 in the 19 and under division, I believe it was. Kid was a high school standout. He's a great, great player. I think he's averaging about 17 right now. He's solid. I was glad when I saw that this is who you picked, because he's one of those thorn in the side guys. He's just always there. When he's the number 2 guy, guess what? He's there and picks up when the number 1 guy goes down, which happened. I can't remember his teammate that slowed up a little bit about a season or season and a half ago. My only concern is his sturdiness. How sturdy is he? He was slowed down a little bit in 21-22. Has this thing called synovitis. Synovitis is the inflammation of the synovial membrane, which is the membrane that goes between, say, your ankles, your knee joints, and things like that. Areas where it can be you get pits and caverns, and they swell up. He had to wear braces on both ankles. It was one that was messing him up. But in high school, he actually missed time for the same condition. Could be a situation where he was just still going through the growth spurts. I just hope that doesn't slow him down. NBA prospect, boy, that's going to be a tough one. International prospect, he's got it all over him. He's got a lot of years of ball left in him, and just with his size, his shooting ability, and that team attitude he brings with them, great, great, great player.
Yeah, just looking things over. This is according to NBA draftroom.com. Currently late first to mid second draft projection.
Great.
They give Rick Fox as a comparison. So, I mean, Rick Fox was a pretty good role player, had a pretty good career, and currently is the 15th ranked small forward. So they have him as a small forward. Yes. ESPN has him listed as a guard. He's 6'7", so maybe a little bit of a tweener, but not the first name you think of, but I also think if someone can get this kid in the second round and he puts together a career like a Rick Fox, or one of those type of players, I think they'll be very, very happy. And thanks for also shining light on that. The situation he's been dealing with. You talk about bad ankle, or situations where your ankles and knees, already at a disadvantage, right? That most of us have. Obviously, basketball is a pretty tough sport to do that. So hopefully he's, able to fight through that. I'm sure, I hate to say it, but I'm sure NBA scouts are going to kind of keep an eye on that. Right. Fortunately, I mean, it's whether it's right or wrong, it's a business. And, if you're a fan of that team, you'd like them to do their homework. So hopefully he isn't, penalized too much for that. But Coach, what are your thoughts on Jaime Jaquez?
Before I touch on the versatility of a Jaime Jaquez Jr., let me touch up on the versatility of what are we going to go with today? Dr. Martinez, Professor Martinez. First, it's a history lesson. Now it's a biology report. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's pulling everything out. And I love it. But, Jaime Jaquez, 6'7", small forward. This is a Mick Cronin guy. This is all Mick Cronin had at Cincinnati. And now this is the versatility of a Jaime Jaquez. Strong, big, small forward, good defender, but with offensive game, where a lot of the guys that Mick Cronin's had before, they just willed you and willed him and willed victories out of defense. Defense, them and San Diego State, that's all they did. They won on defensive principles where the scoring was below 55.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this earlier. You know, when Steve Alford was at UCLA, I was like, cool, he's no threat to San Diego State. All the other big names, I knew they weren't going to be a threat to San Diego State as far as how we field the team and how we dominate the region. But as soon as I heard Mick Cronin, I was like, gosh darn it. Like he was the fifth candidate on a list of big names where he probably should have been one or two out of those names, because this dude could coach. These guys play defense. Now he's got teams that play hard-nosed Mick Cronin type defense with offensive capabilities. And now look at them. Won the Pac-12. They're going to be a top 4 seed. They got players like Jaime Jaquez, and it was Swing last year. He's in the NBA now. I think he's oh man, I know I see him in my head. I just forgot his name, but just big athletic defenders with offensive skill. That's Jaime Jaquez. I don't blame the guy for playing on the U18 Mexican team. There's a lot of guys ahead of him for the USA U18 team. So, you know, anytime you get a chance to expand your horizons and get that experience on another level, forget about high school, forget about college. Now we're talking international ball. You take every chance to get on one of those teams, regardless of where you were actually born, and you get that experience because it's irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. Great player spotlight. I talk too much about this kid. I don't like UCLA, but I like Mick Cronin, but I like this kid. It's a conundrum, but maybe because San Diego State blew it last night, I'm all about him and them right now. But yeah, good guy, good player.
Yeah, it's very similar to last week. I'm not even going to try it. I already butchered his name probably 2 or 3 times last week. But the Lithuanian forward out of Arizona, we talked about his international exposure and experience. And you're right. It's not the normal AAU or Division One college. It's a little different. Things are different. You know, the game is different. It's played differently. You know, they actually probably play a little bit of defense over there. So I think it's great exposure for him. And like you said, an opportunity as well to, you know, highlight his, you know, his family's, you know, ancestry and, you know, Mexican ancestry. I think it's great. And Raider Jim, you brought up the fairness in terms of, you know, Tony Gonzalez being whatever 6'6". I always think of Yao Ming. You know, with all due respect, let's be honest, people of Asian descent are usually, you know, a little shorter, but then you got Yao Ming, and I remember, I think his name was Yi Jialing. They were like 7'6", those type of players. And it's like, okay, all of those two got all of the height for everyone else. But yeah, that's a great little situation there. But great analysis from both of you. And going forward, I think we're going to have to keep our eye on Jaquez Jr., not just in the next few weeks, but like I said, hopefully in the next few years, we could see him be on an NBA team and stick around somewhere and have a very good career, to the point where 3 or 4 years ago, we're talking about a kid that is the 15th ranked small forward or 15th ranked whatever, mid to late projection, blah, blah, blah. And we can say, you know what, but look what we saw out of Jaime Jaquez. So we'll see how that goes.
You know, one last thing as far as his draft status goes. And 10 years ago seems like a long time, but it really isn't. If he wasn't a senior, you know, he's easily a lottery pick. He's a lot like Draymond. Second rounder that could do a lot of really good things. Defensive minded, could shoot the three, has a nice little shooting, you know, technique. But because he's a senior, he'll be a steal after the first round if he just happens to drop that far.
Yeah, I think the NBA these days, and rightfully so. I'm not a GM or anything like that. But I think they draft a little bit more on potential rather than what's there right now. And yeah, you're right. As a senior, he doesn't have the ceiling that a lot of these, 17, 18, and 19-year-old kids have. But he'll get a shot somewhere, and I can't wait to see what he puts together. I'm also in the same boat as Coach. Very few things in this world that I don't like more than UCLA, but I do like to give some love to some players who deserve it, and Jaime Jaquez is certainly one of them. But
yeah,
moving on to the team reports, we will start with the Gonzaga Bulldogs and of course the WCC, a big weekend for both Gonzaga and the WCC. To let us know all about it, we have Raider Jim Martinez. Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I really do have to start out with a big congratulations and many, many kudos to Randy Bennett. Has always been one of my favorite coaches. He is this year's WCC Coach of the Year. That was just announced today. And we also have a kid from Santa Clara, Brandon Pazimski, and Drew Timme splitting Player of the Year honors for the WCC. And congratulations, of course, to my Gonzaga Bulldogs who stayed the course and pulled off the victory at home on Saturday and made St. Mary's give up half of that title, and was a great game. Very well played. It's going to be a heck of a WCC tournament. Of course, St. Mary's is getting the #1 seed. Gonzaga is going to be the #2 seed. And unless there's some miracle, that's going to be the two teams you see in the NCAA tournament. It could be that Santa Clara, the upstarts, come out and pull an upset somewhere along the way. If Gonzaga or St. Mary's get knocked out, you never know. You might end up seeing something odd happen where WCC ends up with 3 teams in there. The tournament, speaking of the WCC tournament, starts tomorrow, and it's going to be #8 Portland against #9 USD. Whoever wins that one is going to have to play BYU. And then we also have, let's see, I think the other game is going to be Pacific, #7 Pacific against #10 Pepperdine. Whoever wins that one is going to get to play against #6 USF. All in all, by this time next week, it's all in the books. Somebody's going to be the outright champion. Somebody's going to be the higher seed going into the tournament. Congratulations to Mark Few and Gonzaga for battling through. It's interesting. They've lost 5 games this year, and that's a bad season. And it just kind of makes you smile because even I say, man, this is an off year. Really? They lost 5 games. Are you kidding me? But they're in the top 10 again. That was a lot of hard work because they had really, I think they dropped down to 16 at one point.
Yeah.
But they stuck with it. They persevered. Other news for the Gonzaga Bulldogs, Julian Strother was also first team WCC. Here's the only gripe I'm going to have, because you've heard me just do nothing but sing this guy's praise. He has been there to back it up and been in there every minute of every game. And when Timme had an off night, he was there to pick up the slack. And Anton Watson gets honorable mention. Not even third team, not even second team. How they gave Anton Watson, my first award winner for the grown-ass man of the year that I named earlier this year, and to give him an honorable mention, I think that's a travesty. I think the young man deserved, if not to be the first team, fine. Second team should have been. We did get Malachi Smith on there for the sixth man of the year. Congratulations, though, to all those kids in the West Coast Conference, the underappreciated conference at times, if you will. They played very, very well. Interesting to see what Lavin does in the off season, how his recruiting goes. He's got an uphill battle.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar, the WCC is kind of an interesting. It's almost a ladder type bracket. Essentially, St. Mary's and Gonzaga are already in the semifinals. They get 2 or 3 buys, however that works out. And even 3 and 4 get double buys, and obviously the 5 and 6s get buys as well. So it's a little different, but at the same time, I think it works for the WCC, because if you had just 8 teams, in the normal quarterfinal, semifinal, final, there may be a chance that St. Mary's gets, clipped early on. And now we're wondering, wait, did they do enough? At the very least, you're going to have the two best teams in the semifinals at the very least. So a little interesting there, but I do like the way the WCC does it there. So moving on to the Aztec side of things. Oh my goodness. The Aztecs had everything lined up. They got a big win over New Mexico this past or earlier in the week, or I'm sorry, it was on the weekend, excuse me. And last night being, of course, the 28th of February, was a Tuesday night. Going to Boise, they have a 3-point lead at half, and then just really fell flat in the second half. That's the only real way you can put it. They get outscored 39-30. You don't see a San Diego State team, especially in the second half, give up nearly 40 points, but that's what we did. Boise got the job done. They have an opportunity now to get a share of that Mountain West championship. So it was a very, very unfortunate situation for the Aztecs. They didn't get that outright win. I lost my standings, so give me one moment while I pull this up, and there is my cat to just go right across. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
We got Raider Jim's dogs and Brandon's cat. So I'm surprised the hail didn't bring her out. So but at the moment you do have San Diego State still with the opportunity still with that opportunity. Boise sits in second, and then Nevada, Utah State are the top four. So for San Diego State, it's looking like either a Nevada or Utah State, semifinal. Of course, assuming they get by the first one. Overall, for the Aztecs, they're still in very good shape. I saw a projection. I don't know if it was Doug Gottlieb or just CBS Sports. They gave San Diego State a 5 seed right now. I don't know if that's after last night. I can't imagine it is. I think the Aztecs, that's their ceiling. They went out, including the conference tournament. A 5 seed would be great. But I think a 6 or a 7 would probably be more reasonable and something to think about going forward. But for the Aztecs, they had an opportunity last night to really stamp things. Yes, sir.
Forgive me if you said it, my sound cut out for a minute. Did I hear earlier on today's news that they were actually up by 8 and did not score the last 5 minutes of the game?
Okay,
they were up by 8 and didn't score the last 4 minutes.
Oh, 4 minutes. Okay.
Wow. So I wanted to talk about it.
Go for it.
Announcers curse all game long. It didn't matter. It didn't matter which team. Because every time they talked about a very good free throw shooter, clank, right? Oh, Dagenhart, he's a top Mountain West free throw shooter, shooting over 70%. Clank, right? First one, clank, second one. They just got the offensive rebound. Announcers curse. Oh, San Diego State had a great run of victories under legendary Steve Fisher, where they went such and such in whatever under 5 minutes, and it was about the 4:38 mark, and he mentioned it, and from that point on they did not score again. Rice went on a 12-0 run himself. I want to be positive about this. What a hard stretch run at the pit, at Boise, coming home senior night, going 1-1 those 2 last road games. However, you mentioned it earlier, as far as the seeding goes. I think it's a lot harder now than it might have been, but there were talks of San Diego State as a 4 seed if they got the win at New Mexico, if they held on for the victory at Boise and won the conference tournament. They were going to be a lock for a 4 seed and determine for themselves where they wanted to play. Sacramento was top of the list, staying on the West Coast. That could still happen. Things got to fall in place, and they got to win out this Sunday against Wyoming, and they got to win out in Vegas in the conference tournament. There's a small chance, but there's a chance they could still get a 4 seed in the West. Just other chips have to fall.
Yeah.
Now, 5, as dim as it may seem after last night's loss, I think the shock of the loss is what's dimming that 5 seed. However, I still think they're a 5 seed. I'd rather take a 5 versus a 6, so they better want that as well. But we've seen them blow 20-point leads all season long. And in preparation for moments like at New Mexico and in preparation for moments like last night against Boise State, it doesn't sit well. And hopefully this team could reflect hard about that. And really, I think more than anything, the lack of focus and attention to detail in the second half is what gets you past the first round in an NCAA tournament. The spotlight and the expectations, the pressures are at an extreme, and the way they've ended the last 4 or 5 games just isn't very positive. Regardless, they've won, other than last night, they've won those games, but how they've won it down the stretch, how they've held on to leads or let them dwindle down the stretch is not very positive looking, and that coaching staff has to get it together or send the same message, because I believe they've addressed it. Send the same message, but do it somehow differently. Just change the tactic of the message, because the message has to be clear and it has to be the same. How they're getting it to the kids or not getting it to the kids, it's been showing. And they're still having trouble breaking a full court press. And we talked about blueprints against Purdue. The blueprint is pressure San Diego State's guards, let them trap themselves in the corners, and hopefully they could get out of it. And, luckily they have for the most part, but not last night. And luckily against New Mexico. And, so, Boise State has a tough final game at Utah State. Utah State is, one of those last 4 out bubble teams. And if they could win at Utah State and make a good, significant run in the Mountain West tournament, that would be huge. So they got a motivating factor for this final game against Boise State. Now, Wyoming, they beat Nevada. Shame on Nevada. And I think San Diego State definitely can't overlook this Wyoming team. Not on senior night. Right.
So, Coach, I got a question for you. Being a coach yourself and working with the
Utes.
Yeah, the Utes. There you go. You made the comment about getting the message to the kids, and as you were saying that, it made me think of a gentleman, colleague of mine, who back in the day, he was actually the manager of the La Mesa Pony League team that won the World Series. Guy knows how to coach. Actually coached Dave Roberts and John Lynch Jr. when they were between high school and college. He was that caliber. Several years out of that, he was asked by a friend to go to Helix. Would you come and help me coach the freshman team at Helix? So he did. It was one of his former players. And I saw him a few weeks into the season. I said, how's it going? And he looked at me and he said, biggest mistake I've ever made. I wish I hadn't agreed to do it, and I'll never do it again, because I'll tell you what, they all know more than I do. They are not going to listen to a thing I say. Some will execute. They might try it. Well, he says, I just have to repeat and repeat and repeat. And even with that, they just kind of look, nod, and then do what they want anyway. Do you think there's any of that going on?
Absolutely. But that as a staff, and you pull that one guy. And I think weeks ago, we had heard stories that Guaca Rope called a players only meeting, and they went on a great run after that meeting. that staff has to pull that one guy, and it might be him again. That sixth-year guy, who's physically incapable to perform a couple years ago, called a retirement for himself, but just stuck around, and coaches convinced him to stick around, and he's given everything he can to this staff. I absolutely agree that these guys know. They know. They all know. It's a generational thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's that one or two guys that are on that bench that those guys get the message to them. Like I said, the message is always the same. Change the tactic, how it gets to them. Well, here's one change. Get that veteran guy in there. Make it sound like he's called the players only meeting again.
Right.
Well, and there is no script. It's from the heart. It's sincere. There could be tears. There could be, ego trips, whatever. But they know, and they gotta hear it amongst their peers.
Right. Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a young lady yesterday. Our head women's coach says, "Where are my girls at?" I said, "I don't know. They're not my responsibility." And Arlene's this young lady's name. I said, "Arlene, where are your girls at?" She goes, "I don't know." I said, "Why don't you do coach and myself a favor? Group text them, see where they're at. Sometimes it's not always what coaches have to say, and they can't hear it from us all the time. But if they hear it from their peers, it adds so much significance." Sure, coach. Sure, coach. I'm like, there it is. So that peer influence can't be underestimated. And the other thing is, I'm 17 years in as a head coach, 20 total, just with that coach in my title. The lingo has changed, and they are able to communicate in different sense and tones and words the same message as we've been trying to do for decades, but they have their own lingo, and that's maybe could be the trick. My former college coach used to coach basketball, and he would always tell us this story. He had this outstanding small forward out of Harlem, could score from anywhere on the court, but couldn't play a lick of defense. He told him, "Hey, we need you to make a stop. Just go out there and pretend to play defense." All of a sudden, the guy was a shutdown defender on top of putting 20 points the rest of the season, player at a conference, because he just changed the verbiage of it. Could be as simple as, "You need to play defense harder," to, "Hey, just pretend to play defense," and it happens.
Yeah.
So there's stories like that across the nation. Your peers are an influence, and as a coach, there's those moments where I put my trust in those guys. So every team has a captain, not just named, but earned, where those kids listen to a little bit more, and that can be that motivating factor.
Yeah. Definitely. It's going to be interesting going forward for San Diego State. I hate to say it, but what happened last night was very reminiscent of what happened last March, and has pretty much happened in essentially
Hawaii.
every game. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you can look at most of San Diego State's heartbreaking losses, and they're going to have this same script. You want to talk about script writers being lazy? San Diego State script writers are pretty lazy. It's always the same. It's always the same plot, it seems like, in these losses. So hopefully they can get that figured out. As of course we are into March, so it's time for them to figure out how they're going to kind of get themselves and improve off last year's rough situation. So
one last thing, and it's way too late in the college season, and I don't even think you would have time in a college season to execute this, but a reel came across my feed a couple of weeks back, and Steve Kerr had just had it. He had it. These guys know it all. And he designated 3 guys. One was Andre Iguodala, one was Draymond Green, and one was Klay Thompson, to draw up everything throughout the entirety of that game in timeouts. Right? He said, "Hey, I'm not doing nothing. You guys aren't listening to me anyway. Listen to these guys." They ended up winning that game by 30, and the execution was what he expected it to be, which was
There you go.
pretty flawless. So you get the message across, you just change how it's sent, and I loved it. So
Yeah, it's I want to be positive about San Diego State, but
So do
games like last night are just it's tough. It's really hard to be like. Don't get me wrong. 15 years ago, we would have killed for something like this, but we've had 15 years of big time success. Maybe it's time we take a next step forward instead of the same thing over and over again. But with that,
Lateral gets old, doesn't it?
yeah,
yes,
it does. It does.
Very fast.
Old fast. But
Yeah.
final segment of the show, as always, be looking ahead to the top games of the weekend and early week. Not a ton this weekend, mainly because next week, or essentially this weekend, is the end for most big colleges, or at least the power conferences. And of course, the smaller conferences are having their conference tournaments this weekend. But tomorrow night, being Thursday, the 2nd of March, we'll have a big one. University of Arizona, number 8 in the country. They'll head to USC. USC at the moment, definitely a bubble team. They would love to get a win over Arizona to couple that with their win over UCLA they had earlier in the year. Saturday, good games, not stacked like always, but you have number 2 Alabama at number 24 Texas A&M. I tell you what, that crowd will make Brandon Miller remember situations over and over again. Then you also have the big one in the Big 12, number 3 Kansas at number 9 Texas. Number 25 Pittsburgh is at number 16 Miami. The Hurricanes had a bit of a heartbreaker against Florida State this past weekend. And then Sunday we'll see Illinois, a good team in itself. They will head to Purdue. Purdue, of course, still fighting for that number 1 seed. They're going to have to get a win over Illinois for sure to get that. And then Monday, Tuesday, that's when the WCC semifinals and final will get rolling. And another thing to let you know, obviously, next week about this time, Wednesday, most of the big conferences are going to get rolling. Raider Jim, what game jumps out, or what games jump out to you for the games of the week?
Here's the 2 that jump out, and really it's even a question to you guys. So let's say Arizona splits. Let's see they lose to USC and then they go out and they beat UCLA. Then what happens? Because the way the season is gone, all the things we've seen this year, this one should have lost, this one should have won. That's not going to surprise me at all if that happened. I think it wasn't at USC took out UCLA not that long ago.
Yep, that was the last loss for UCLA.
Right. So, wow. I mean, what do we do then? What do you do then? What happens to Arizona? Do they stay at number 8? Do they drop out of the top 10? That's going to be interesting to see. And then I also think Purdue's going to have their hands full on Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting going forward this weekend. Kind of the last, the Pac-12, I'll be honest, that is a nightmare scenario for the Pac-12 conference as a whole. Because then I see Arizona and UCLA both getting 2 seeds. Essentially, a real easy way to throw an extra Big 10 or Big 12 team into the 1 seed saga would be Arizona losing to USC, but beating UCLA, and then USC or Oregon State again winning the Pac-12 tournament, blah, blah, blah. But that's for another day. But Coach, what are your thoughts on the games of the week?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, good for them, I guess. I'm ready to get this March Madness thing rolling. Just finishing my final thought on San Diego State. They went on a good run, and maybe they needed that loss to kind of chin check themselves. We'll see the response Sunday, but like you guys are bringing up what happens if USC or Arizona lose or UCLA lose this time of the year. Unless you're not a ranked team and you're on that bubble, there are no bad losses because they kind of like bring you back down to earth. I think what's UCLA won 8 in a row since that
Yes.
loss. I mean, yeah, that's like San Diego State's run. You know, how many they won in a row, and maybe they just needed that loss to kind of like center themselves again. But yeah, Purdue's gonna have a handful against Illinois. You know,
Yeah.
that's all I really have.
I'm looking forward to that, to the Monday, Tuesday, the WCC, because look, I do expect it to be St. Mary's, Gonzaga. No disrespect to the other teams in the WCC, but it is kind of the all right, the best of 3, 1-1 for Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Let's see who gets the big trophy, because I believe it's going to be essentially a share of the WCC regular season title. These two teams were 1-1 against each other. Let's see who gets it all in that one game. And, obviously there are plenty of teams in the WCC who would love to spoil that party. I just don't see it happening. So I'm keeping an eye on that. And then, of course, Kansas, Texas. I think that's a big, barometer for Kansas to see really how good this team is. If they can go and get that win, my goodness, watch out. Kansas may be the best team heading into the tournament. If that is the case. So
I mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned that last week. I think Kansas
Well,
is
they had
clear
a
cut.
great week last week or 2 weeks.
Right. And they're fighting for that number 1 overall. Talk about positioning themselves wherever they want to start off the tournament. But I one other game, and I mentioned it way earlier when we talked about Villanova. UConn Villanova could be that flip-flop between 5 and 6. That could be that spark that Nova team may need. And now that you mention it, that it's at Nova, I'm looking forward to it. And I just want to finish. We don't ever talk community college men's basketball. But, I would be hard-pressed to ignore the fact that my colleague, my school, San Diego City College, 9th straight year in the playoffs.
Wow.
3rd straight season in the Sweet 16. Prior to 2017, a California State Championship. 2018, a California State runner-up. Great run by head coach Mitch Charlins, who last season was on the bench at USD, came back and has the program back at doing his best and doing what he does best, coaching these young men, helping them and guiding them to grow up and be great persons on top of it. And the work he's put in is identified by the success of his program. So go San Diego City College Knights. They play Fullerton this weekend. I'm contemplating driving up like I normally do. And college basketball at its finest is always around the corner for me.
Amen. Yeah, it's a great final thought there from you, Coach. Best of luck to the Knights as they head up north. If you do go up there, Coach, please drive carefully. I don't know how the weather is going to be this weekend, but I know we'll still probably have some of the after effects of this storm. So be careful, be safe, and hopefully you get to see your team get that win and keep moving forward.
Yes.
But Raider Jim, what are your final thoughts for this edition of In the Paint?
Final thoughts. Well, a lot of appreciation, thanks, and kudos to Sports San Diego, the same group that brings in the Holiday Bowl. They back all the soccer programs that are here, professional soccer programs. But when they announced today that this coming Thanksgiving, they're going to have an inaugural NCAA men's basketball 4-team tournament, that is fantastic. Now, we're not talking fly by night. We're talking USC, Seton Hall, Iowa, and Oklahoma. That's basketball. That's good basketball. And Coach, I sent a note to Brandon First earlier today. I was just too fired up about this thing. And if they get a good response, I can see it easily expanding to 8 teams, where the Tritons will always be an automatic invite just like Chaminade in the Maui Classic.
Very fun. Very fun.
Yeah, I think that's a great call there from you, Raider Jim. And once again, UCSD is I believe they, as of about 3 or 4 years ago, moved into D1. That is not an easy transition. So, they're going through their growing pains now, but they were a D2 powerhouse for a while, and that would be absolutely fantastic to see something like that happen. I'll have to try and find a way to get some tickets to that USC matchup. Love to see my Trojans go at it. My final thoughts, I'm going to take us, we're going well off the reservation here on this one.
Sure.
We don't ever talk hockey. We don't ever, really get into that, but I'm a huge Kings fan, LA Kings fan. And unfortunately the LA Kings, they did the old Junior Seau or Dean Spanos to Junior Seau situation. Essentially a big FU to arguably, actually, I know for a fact, the greatest goalie in Kings history. Jonathan Quick was essentially shown the door along with a first-round pick for a team that is thoroughly, fighting for a playoff spot. I'm 99.9% sure Jonathan Quick does not listen to this program, but if there's that 0.1% that he does, I just want to say thank you, Jonathan. We wouldn't have one, let alone 2 Stanley Cups if it wasn't for you. It's very unfortunate the way it's all ended. Best of luck going forward. Hopefully you can rub it in our faces going forward. But I just wanted to give Jonathan Quick a great shout out. He's one of the greatest American goalies in hockey history. I'm very, very excited to have been able to see him as long as possible. And I do get see Coach chiming in that St. Augustine, I believe they won the CIF championship earlier this weekend. They'll be playing in the open division as my cat goes right across again in the open division state playoffs. So best of luck to them going forward and all the teams in San Diego. And of course, as we get deeper into March, all the teams as we get ready for March Madness. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the In the Paint podcast presented by the Ferst Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Be safe. Take care. We'll talk to you later.